I tell you what, I love me some tag team wrestling. A lost art in many ways in the modern era is slowly finding its way back as teams such as the Young Bucks, DIY and Red Dragon push it to forgotten heights. This wasn't always the case though, and back in the day tag teams were considered an imperative part of any wrestling event. A different way to showcase things and just change up the pace. Now there were 4 guys instead of 2. What a world we live in. It was the case with WCW too, which is why I'm Simon from What Culture and this is the 10 greatest WCW tag teams of all time. Number 10, the Midnight Express. If you were a tag team from the 80s, you had to have Express in your name. That was like some sort of unwritten wrestling rule. Don't you dare break it. While the Midnight Express did have many incarnations over the years, the best, many would say, was Sweet Stan Lane and Beautiful Bobby Eaton. They owned the division 30 years ago, boasting great in-ring work and proper tag team psychology, having good matches with nearly everyone by sticking to a formula and just working like crazy people. The icing on the cake was having Jim Cornette as their manager. It all came together to create a team for the ages. They did it. They made it. They had an impact. And I'm incredibly proud. Number 9, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. 2 of the founding members of the Four Horsemen, Arn and Tully were superb in the 1980s, teaming together originally in 1986 and going after the NWA Tag Team titles straight away. They had incredible matches with the Rock and Roll Express, who they eventually beat for the belts. They even got a victory over the Road Warriors at Starrcade 97. And no one got a victory over the Road Warriors. Literally no one. Well, not literally, because they did, but you take my point. Focusing on being utter ring generals and ignoring the frills that many teams seeked, nobody cut the ring off as good as Tully and Arn. They knew that letting their opponent get to their side of the apron was ridiculous, so they made sure such a thing rarely happened. It just made so much sense. Controlling the pace of the match and just being downright awesome, they eventually went to the WWE in 1989 where they became the Brainbusters and continued to showcase their skills. Go and watch some of their work right now. You will not be disappointed. Number 8, The Outsiders. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall changed the business when they invaded WCW programming in 1996. The first shot in what would become the Monday Night War, it was as if the two had come to attack World Championship Wrestling even though they were still employed by the WWE. This wasn't the case, and all involved were threatened with legal action. But the groundwork had still been laid and the NWO was on the cards. Securing themselves as the hottest thing throughout the industry alongside Hulk Hogan, the team of Hall and Nash would focus on the tag team division while the Hulkster starred in the main event. Winning the gold at Halloween Havoc after defeating Harlem Heat, the Outsiders, in many ways, were the first cool heels of wrestling, a duo you were supposed to boo, but loved because of how they acted. Undoubtedly a polarizing team, they had such an impact on WCW's success you'd be mad not to include them here. I'm not mad. That's why they're here. Number 7, Sting and Lex Luger. 2 of the biggest stars in WCW, Sting and Lex Luger teamed up as much as they feuded with each other. It was a love-hate relationship to say the least. The pair worked wonderfully together though, often masking each other's flaws and accentuating their own strengths. The highlight came in 1995 when Luger returned to WCW after his stint in the WWE. Winning the tag team champions and feuding with the likes of the Steiners, Harlem Heat and the Outsiders, Sting would often have the crap beaten out of him before Luger got the hot tag and ran riot. It gave the division a huge boost as they were both seen as stars before coming to an end when Luger turned on Sting as the former thought the latter had joined the NWO. You think he could have just asked him. Number 6, the Hollywood Blondes. What happens when you put 2 super talents together as a team? You get a superior tag team. Simple as that. Comprised of stunning Steve Austin and Brian Pillman, the Hollywood Blondes were never meant to be a success and instead were thrown together in 1992 to try and help get other teams over. Because of how good they both were, however, it was hard not to warm to them and they became one of the most popular acts in the company. Having fantastic matches with Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, the Blondes were just a perfect mix of new and old. Because this was WCW though, as soon as they got any momentum, they were split up. They had achieved more than they were meant to, so everything had to be stopped. Which is ridiculous. Number 5, the Nasty Boys. This may sound weird, but when the Nasty Boys debuted in 1990, they were considered groundbreaking. Yep, I'm deadly serious. In an era where most teams just wore trunks and boots, the fact Brian Knobbs and Jerry Saggs turned up wearing black leather and had massive mohawks just stood out. It made fans take notice, and while their initial WCW run lasted less than a year, their return in 1993 would prove to be more successful. Becoming one of the best teams in the business, they won the WCW tag team titles within weeks of coming back and had crazy brawls against everyone they could. These were cutting edge in 1994 in terms of mainstream TV wrestling. You were more likely to see this stuff on the indies or in Japan. There's no doubt that sags and knobs could be stiff and a little sloppy at times, but they found a way past their limited athletic ability to have fights that had something memorable about them. They broke up in 1996 when sags retired, but did receive a tryout match in 2007 when they were looking to have one more run with the WWE. The pair ignored what they were told to do, and unsurprisingly weren't used again. Number 4, the Rock and Roll Express. One list, 2 teams who love the word express. Told you that was the case. Still though, the Rock and Roll Express were one of the best teams in pro wrestling history, with Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson proving their talent week in, week out. Mixing high flying with charisma and boasting a unique look, they took Southern wrestling by storm in the 80s, having great matches wherever they went. The main reason for this is how well they could sell. An imperative tool back in the day, Morton and Gibson could make you believe they were having the kicked out of them, making their comeback even more incredible than it would have been otherwise. It was a simple formula, but one that worked over and over again. Somehow, they're still appearing on the indie scene today. Number 3, Harlem Heat. Brothers in real life as well as in the ring, Booker T and Stevie Ray signed with WCW in 1993 and had momentum from the off. Squaring off against some truly epic names such as the British Bulldog and Sting, they had their first taste of tag team gold in 1994 under the management of Sensational Sherry. They would go on to have a whopping 9 more reigns with the belts, which is a record, and 1997 in particular will go down as a year where they were nothing short of brilliant. Having notable encounters with the Steiners, NWO and Public Enemy, their matches got better and better and started to underline just how good Booker T was and the potential he had. There was a brief reunion in 2000, but we won't talk about that. It was not good. Number 2, the Road Warriors. There's no two ways about it. The Road Warriors are one of the best tag teams ever. It's just a fact. Making a name for themselves in the AWA in Japan during the 80s, they're also a huge part of the NWA and WCW with their imposing physiques and smash-mouth style. They soon became one of the most dominant teams in the industry and would often beat the absolute crap out of jobbers, which just raised their aura further. And they had the Doomsday Device, one of the most terrifying moves you could hope to see. Essential to WCW between 1986 and 1990, they then joined the WWE as the Legion of Doom, where they continued to kick ass and take names. The pair did return to WCW in 1996, but their second run was nowhere near as memorable as before, and it only took them 6 months before they were headed back out of the company after falling out with Eric Bischoff. This may have signalled the end of days for the team, but it didn't matter. They had already made their mark and will probably never be forgotten. And that's some feat. Number 1, the Steiners. Rick and Scott Steiner were one of the most feared teams ever. Able to kick both your ass in and out the ring, the brothers debuted in 1989 and almost from the off started taking liberties with their opponents. They would throw people around at will and wouldn't think twice about stretching them if they believed the situation called for it. There was just something about them though, and they wrestled differently from everyone else, and that just allowed them to stand out. This all resulted in some classic matches during their first WCW run that still hold up today. They're so good. Even when they came back to WCW after being with the WWE, they were still great, fitting back into the fold almost effortlessly and continuing to fly. They called it a day in 1997 and went on to have singles careers, Scott especially, but the Steiners remain one of the most respected teams ever. Not least because if you didn't respect them, they would beat you up.
So that was our video. Thank you for watching. Please do feel free to click on anything happening around my head or something terrible might happen to this dog. Is that you too sweeting me, bro? Ugh. Disgusting. That's really bad.